As a kid, my taste in games was considerably more limited from what it is today, so if nostalgia had to revolve around my past experiences, the games I'd regard as nostalgic would be low in quantity. Not to mention the fact that I simply lost interest in some of the games I played as a kid, but despite this fact, it just happens that there are games out there that I do have nostalgia for. I would say that the biggest example of a game that I have a lot of nostalgia for would be Pokemon Gold, Silver and Crystal. I would stay up all night and be tired on school mornings because I wanted to catch those nighttime Pokemon in the wild. It felt so immersive to me back then, as it felt like an extension of my life. And this was all thanks to the real-time clock, where each day and each time of day brought about something fresh, which meant that to fully experience the game, you had to play every single day, both day and night. It was a concept that was ahead of its time, something which we take for granted nowadays. The personalisation of your team has always been one of the main attractions to Pokemon, as well as the invested empowerment brought by levelling up, which was enough to compel me to play the game for countless hours. But on top of that, it had a whole world to explore, filled to the brim with secrets. I would wake up and follow my usual routine in-game, almost as if it was a daily routine in life. It's Friday, so I'm going to the Union Cave to catch a Lapras, or it's the day of the bug catching contest, so I should head to the park and take part in it to see if I can catch a Cypher. These simple pleasures made this game so memorable to me. The feeling of Wonderlust enveloped me completely in the game, almost as if I was playing Skyrim. On top of that, it also added a lot of quality of life improvements, which made it easier to play than its predecessors, Red, Blue and Yellow. In retrospect, is Pokemon Gold and Silver good? Well, that's difficult to answer. While it does use old school turn-based combat, you'd never really know because fights are entirely one-on-one, so you wouldn't have to worry about the tedium of selecting commands for an entire party. Though this did become a problem in later installments with double battles, the systems used in Pokemon have always been rather questionable in regards to how the game's variable values are programmed. It may appear to be a simple kids game on the surface, but underneath all of that there's a very convoluted system that is an absolute pain for those looking to min-max to get to grips with and utilise. This has been an issue that has plagued the series for a long time, and it only gets worse in later entries. But Pokemon Gold and Silver, save for the egg hatching mechanic, doesn't introduce too many convoluted systems like Nature's, so it's not the most complex Pokemon game out there, thankfully. I think if you're going to Pokemon Gold and Silver, you need to set your expectations low, especially nowadays, but I do still think that you can have a fun time with the game, even today, as it isn't too flawed to have fun with, but it does narrowly avoid suffering from some issues that would have made the game a chore to play. On the other hand, we have a game that I played and enjoyed as a kid that I simply couldn't enjoy as an adult. Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro on the PlayStation is a game that I have a ton of nostalgia for. Now, I'm not really the biggest comic book or Marvel fan out there, but this game and I go way back. I remembered so many of the levels, the music, the scenes, and felt nostalgic for the game for the longest time after I misplaced it. Upon reacquiring the game and playing it again, I found that the game wasn't really all that good to begin with. In fact, it's pretty bad. But despite all of this, I still have nostalgia for it, and the game still lives rent-free in my head as a childhood memory. A good childhood memory. I still have a fondness for the game for that reason. But as my review shows, the game isn't all that great in retrospect. So as you can see, nostalgia doesn't affect my opinion on games. That doesn't mean that I don't feel it. Of course I do, but I know well enough when something is nostalgic to me, and when something isn't. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that this extends to games I played as an adult in recent years, that take me back to the style of game I grew up around. Musashi Samurai Legend is one of those games. I absolutely adored the experience overall, despite having to trash on it in my review for having a flawed combat system, but I still had a great time with it. It reminded me of games that came out around the time I was growing up, and the story felt like it was catered towards preteens that grew up with the late 90s and early 2000s, and as one of those people, I resonated with the game so much, yet I still had to trash the game so that my review would not be tainted by my nostalgia. You see, despite all of this, people assume that my hatred towards modern gaming is solely due to nostalgia, which certainly isn't the case. While I won't deny that design-wise, certain genres have improved, and new standards are in place, I feel that modern games don't experiment as much as older games do, and don't take risks. This is one of the reasons why classics are better. Not because of nostalgia, but because of risk-taking, bringing about fresh and innovative experiences which are lacking in the current gaming generation. Now sure, you can make a case for indie games all you want, but those games don't have the budget to reach the heights of classic middle shelf games that greatly benefited from having a much higher budget and bigger teams working on them. Nowadays, it's either one or the other, high budget soulless garbage or low budget passion projects that feel lacking. It used to be that you had games that featured both high budgets and passion. Those days are over now. So, it's not nostalgia that's making me dislike modern gaming. If that was true, then Star Ocean 6 wouldn't be my favourite game in the Star Ocean series, would it? Thing is though, games like Star Ocean 6 are rare nowadays. Most games are either average or trash, plain and simple. Whenever something is above average nowadays, it's a huge deal. Just look at Nier Automata for example. Above average game, but not great, yet everyone goes nuts for it. Games like Nier Automata were a dime a dozen back in the 2000s, but nowadays they are rarely seen. So much so that if Nier Automata released in the 2000s, no one would care. Heck, nobody cared about Nier when that game came out. But that game came out at a different time, before the industry started to starve us by not releasing good games. It should also be noted that most of my favourite games that released back in the 90s and the 2000s were not games I played as a child. Rather, they are games that I played later in life. I was a fully grown adult when I played Valkyrie Profile 2 for the first time. I never played that game as a kid, and if I did, I probably wouldn't have understood it. But the game released around the time that I was still in school, and by that point, I just got my Nintendo Wii and was playing that as well as all the GameCube games I had, like Smash Bros. Melee and Kirby Air Ride to name a couple of examples. Of course, I also played a lot of Final Fantasy back then as well, but aside from 5 and at a push 6, I'm not really all that fond of the Final Fantasy series anymore, as I just lost interest in it over time. But back in the day, I thought they were some of the greatest games ever. Beast 4 The Dawn of Beast, a game that came out the same year I was born, when I was still urinating in diapers, is a game that I beat for the first time in 2023, and it quickly became one of the most impactful games I have ever played in my life. The Red Book audio and anime artwork blended in with a classic sprite-based RPG in ways that I had never thought possible. And since the game was released in the early 90s, the synthesizer was still trending at that time, so needless to say, the music had the synth style of the era, but with the 90s anime artwork overhaul to make something truly special. Something that you would never see today. Is that really nostalgia, or did I simply discover something great for the first time? So while it may be true that I am living in the past these days, it's because I continue to live in the past that I can still find pleasure in gaming. If I was to stick only to modern games, I would have lost interest in this hobby, because it just isn't enough to keep me interested. But fortunately, there's no shortage of classics out there, still waiting for me to discover them. My biggest regret growing up was that I missed out on so many games as a kid, though a lot of that has to do with lack of interest and needing parents to get me money to buy games with. Back then you had to go to game stores and pray that you'd find the game that was advertised in a magazine, something that felt like an impossibility, but not now. Thanks to the internet, classic games are so accessible now, making it the perfect opportunity to go back and play all the amazing games I missed. Yes, that includes every Tri-Ace game ever made. I wish I could have been one of those people who grew up with Star Ocean 2 and Valkyrie Profile 2, but no, I played those games many years after their release. I was late to the party. In a way, that's always been my problem as a gamer, being late and missing out on all the amazing games of the past. Thank God I haven't got much to worry about in that regard nowadays, because there's not much to miss out on now. It's just the same old shit time and time again. So ultimately, my stance on nostalgia is that it gives you those feels that take you back to familiarity, but you know deep down whether the game is good or bad, and you can kind of separate it. And as a reviewer, I feel that I'm able to separate that, and I'm able to separate that well. But that doesn't change the fact that I still feel it, and for that reason, I don't see nostalgia as a negative, but I do get sick and tired of people claiming that nostalgia is the reason why I have the opinions that I do, because it's not true.